Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Buy Art You'll Love, a webinar presented by Art Fair and hosted by me, Hall W. Rockefeller. I am the founder and director of Less Than Half, which is an online platform dedicated to holistically solving the problem of underrepresentation for female artists in both the art market and in art history. I am an art advisor, a writer, an educator, and the host of the Less Than Half Salon, which is a virtual community that brings together women artists and those who are interested in supporting and learning about their work. Today, we're going to be talking about the very big topic of learning to buy art, but so that I can break this down in manageable chunks, I thought I would start with some very basic questions that you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about starting your art collection. Those questions are who, where, what, and how. So let's start with a very simple one. Who? When we think of art collectors, of course, we think of people like titans of industry or monarchy of great countries. But if there's one thing I want you to take away from this webinar today, is that you are absolutely capable of collecting art and living with art you love, no matter what your budget, your values, or the space that you have above your couch. To try to debunk the many myths that there are around art collecting, I thought I would elaborate on some things that I have heard consistently when talking to people about why or why not they collect art. Some common myths about art buying are that you have to be very wealthy, that you have to have a PhD in art history or some other niche interest in the subject, or that you have to live in New York City or some other art metropolis where you have very easy access to art and art galleries. I will tell you that none of these things are true, and that hopefully by the end of this webinar, I will have debunked each of these things to convince you that you are absolutely capable of buying art that you'll love. So on to the next question, where? We've got the who, and now it's time for the question, where? The most common places people probably think about when they're thinking about buying art is the art gallery. So what is an art gallery? An art gallery is for the most part a brick and mortar business run by a gallery director, which represents certain artists. This means that for the most part, the gallery has an agreement with the artist it represents, sometimes called the gallery stable or their roster, an agreement which says that all work from that specific artist will be sold through the gallery. The gallery will often mount exhibitions to show the artist's pieces, work to get the artist's press attention, as well as reach out to the gallery's list of clients to get them to buy. They coordinate much of the logistics of selling art, packing, shipping, etc. In exchange for this work, the gallery gets around 50% of the sale of each work. Secondary market galleries, on the other hand, tend to represent or sell works of artists who have died, or else sell work that is a degree removed from the artist's studio. That is, the artwork has already been sold once before, and the gallery is reselling it. Galleries can feel like very intimidating places, and I will talk a little bit about how to navigate them at the end of this talk. Another place to buy art is an auction house, perhaps the most notorious place for buying art, because these establishments are the ones that make those headline-grabbing sales that we've all heard and read about. But what exactly is an auction house, and what is its business model? Well, an auction house generally works on consignment. Clients will take art that they own and bring it to the auction house to sell. Buyers will then show up on the day of the auction to bid on the work. Of course, we've all seen depictions of auctioneers speaking very quickly, spitting out higher and higher numbers. And of course, it is the person with the highest bid that wins the piece. The auction house will then split the proceeds with the consignor of the artwork. It's important to note that the artist, even if he or she is alive, does not get a slice of this sale price. But just because many of the headline-grabbing records for artworks are coming from auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's, and sometimes slightly smaller auction houses, Phillips and Bonhams, doesn't mean that work being sold there will be out of your price range. My advice would be to look for a day sale or an online sale that is not happening in the months of November and May, which are the big auction weeks, and you're probably going to be able to find something that is in your budget. There are also plenty of smaller auction houses across the country. Two small ones in the city are Doyle and Swan. Swan is especially good at works on paper and vintage posters, which are sure to be in a lower price range. But I'm sure that if you just plug into Google the name of your city or town plus auction house, you'll find a local one that is selling work that you can bid on online, or you can actually make a day of it and go to the auction itself and get a paddle with the number and have a lot of fun with it. Of course, beyond these established brick and mortar spaces, you can buy directly from artists, which is actually my personal favorite way of buying art, and something that is increasingly easy thanks to the internet and social media platforms like Instagram. Artists without representation are generally happy to sell directly to you if you reach out to them. If you reach out to an artist asking to buy a work and they do have gallery representation, note that they will probably send you through the gallery, and you'll have to deal directly with the gallery rather than the artist, as that's in the gallery agreement that the artist will have. But increasingly, artists are finding ways to make it work and are often finding ways to thrive without a gallerist. Platforms like Art Fair, for example, are great because they place artists in direct contact with potential buyers. You can correspond with them on the platform, and you can even arrange a studio visit. But just keep in mind, as with anything on the internet, there needs to be a mutual sense of trust between you and the artist, especially when there's a monetary transaction involved. Prove to the artist that you are indeed a real person, explain why you are drawn to their work, reference your own interests and life experience, offer to meet them via Zoom, any way that you can show that you are an actual interested party is better for the relationship. I like to reach out personally via Instagram because my Instagram shows who I am and that I am indeed a real person. An artist can click through to my profile and see that I've posted things about art and that I am genuinely interested in art in general. So that's my advice. Of course, if you don't have an Instagram, there are many other ways that you can build trust with someone if you've reached out to them through the internet. Okay, well, now comes a hard part. What? Developing your taste is something that I know a lot of new collectors struggle with. Also, thanks to the internet, there has never been more art available to buy. As we all know, choice breeds indecision. So how do you determine what art to buy to make sure that your collection is coherent? Well, my first piece of advice is to be patient with yourself. Know that first and foremost, developing taste is a long-term pursuit. Don't decide to collect post-war landscape paintings of the American West just because that was the last painting that you saw and liked. Give yourself time to feel out what it is that you like best. Another piece of advice I have is in opposition to a piece of advice that a lot of people give when they're asked how to develop their taste. Most often you will have someone tell you that if you're interested in developing your taste, you have to see as much art as possible in the shortest amount of time. You have to go to all the art fairs and go to every museum in your city and see every gallery that you could possibly go and visit. And while I think that that is good advice and you should be looking at art, it's pretty impractical advice because we have so much else going on in our lives. So my advice to you then is to listen to yourself. Chances are your taste isn't going to just jump out at you out of the blue. Look at the other choices that you've made in your life and see how they can translate into a taste in art. Do you tend to be a very hands-on, tactical person? Maybe you would like to look at textile arts. Do you dress colorfully? Perhaps bright abstractions would be more your cup of tea. Is there a political cause that you are dedicated to? Maybe art centered on social practice will be what speaks to you. Just as you go through your life, pay attention to the choices that you're making and try to figure out how that might translate into the art that you might buy. Listening to yourself is also very true in a practical sense. If you have 3 children under 5 years old, you probably shouldn't start collecting ceramics or other delicate pieces of work. Art can and should reflect your values and be an extension of yourself. To get a sense of yourself in relation to your art, I thought I would share an exercise that I share with my own clients. My first instruction is to go to your local museum, whether it's the Met or something smaller, doesn't matter. When you're in that museum, walk through the galleries until you find a room that speaks to you. If you're in a room full of Renaissance paintings and you don't want to look at another picture of the baby Jesus, absolutely skip that room until you find something that really feels like your interest. Once you're in that room, pick a single painting and stand in front of it for 5 minutes. Now, 5 minutes seems like a very short period of time, but the average time that people spend looking at a piece of art in a museum is about 7 seconds. So you'll find that 5 minutes is a very long time. But it's a very rewarding time as well. I want you to sort of think about what the work is about, but also notice things that you didn't notice when you first stood in front of it. Try to articulate to yourself why you like that piece. Then I want you to note down the artist, the year, the medium, and any other pertinent details. And when you go back home, use those search terms to get a sense of the other artists working at that time and perhaps a little bit more about what interests you. For example, if you stand in front of a pastel and you love the effect of the oil on a piece of paper, maybe you're someone who's interested in pastels and you can pursue that interest when you go home and search for other art that is for sale. All right, we move on to our last question, the how. If you walk away with one thing from this webinar, I want you to remember that the art world is a people business, and you will get nowhere treating art collecting the way you would treat buying another commodity or good. Everything in the art world is built on relationships. People talk, and the art world is a lot smaller than you think. If you treat somebody badly, are rude, cheat artists, and act in other abhorrent ways, that will become your reputation, and your ability to buy art will reflect that. The opposite, however, very happily, is true. If you are an advocate for artists, if you respect them and their dealers, if you're polite and knowledgeable, make an effort to understand the work, then that's how you will be known. And people will actually want to work with you. When I say the art world is a people business, I also mean that the product being sold, i.e. the art itself, is a people product. Keep in mind that work being sold is a reflection of something intimate within the artist. So buying a painting is not like buying a sweater. When a piece resonates with you, share that with the artist. Build a rapport and let the artist know that if you were to buy this work, it would be going into a home where you would appreciate it. This also makes a difference. But in addition to the sort of more abstract how, I have a couple pieces of more practical advice about buying from galleries and being in galleries generally. And I know that the gallery is a pretty intimidating space, but it is not as intimidating as people think. So here's a quick sort of run through about gallery visits and what you should expect and how you should conduct yourself. First of all, there's no fee to enter a gallery. You open the door, you make eye contact with the person at the front desk and say hello, if indeed there is anybody at the front desk. And if you do go to a gallery and you find that the work on display is something that you would like to buy, here are a couple tips and tricks for finding out about the price of a work and also perhaps following up with the gallerist. So first of all, if you're in a gallery and you don't know the price, which is usually true because galleries don't generally list prices in any obvious way, but you do want to know if something is in your budget at all, or if it's so wildly outside of it, you shouldn't even think about it. To get a sense of the price, a great trick that I find is that you ask for the price range of a show. It's a quick way of assessing whether you should even entertain the idea of buying a piece. Plus, you don't have to show your cards too much by zeroing in on a specific piece, which might not even be available. Asking for a price range simply marks your curiosity without you having to ask the price of each work until you get to a price that you can afford. Another piece of advice would be to ask for a list of available works. This technique shows that you know what you're talking about. Often exhibitions have pre-sold some of the works on display, but many do not display the traditional red dot next to the painting, indicating that it has been sold. But if you, of course, do see a red dot, that's what it means. It means the painting has already been sold. And if you're curious to know, a collector will receive the work if they have bought it. It will just remain on the wall until the end of the exhibition. Some exhibitions, it's important to note, are also more like museum shows than anything else, in which a few of the works on display might be for sale, but others are loaned to the gallery's exhibition in order to round out the show's curatorial message. By asking for a list of available works, you are letting the galleries know that you understand how selling art works and that many of the pieces on display might not be available to you. I also want to note that if you are in a big gallery like ones in New York City's Chelsea neighborhood, it is likely that the person behind the desk is going to have to go and ask for a director to come down and talk to you if you ask for a price range or a list of available works. That's simply the policy for galleries like that. But don't be intimidated. Just say, yes, you'd like to see a director, and ask the same sorts of questions. It's also important and interesting to note that New York State has a law, if you happen to be in New York State, that says that all prices must be visible to the consumer. So if you mention this, the New York State law demands that any place of sale has the list of prices for whatever it is they're selling. I'm sure you'll be given a price list very quickly. Another great way of finding art, especially when you're interested in having a relationship with the artist directly, is to go to open studios. Open studios are a great way for you to get a sense of how many artists are working in a neighborhood or area, and especially a great efficient way to see what is happening in the world of contemporary art. Open studio is generally a weekend, a coordinated weekend where the artists in a certain neighborhood agree to open their doors. Usually it will be on a Saturday or Sunday, and you can get a map and walk around the neighborhood and just pop into different studios of artists. And of course, many people will be doing that, so there's not so much pressure for you to speak intelligently or ask great questions. You can just sort of absorb art as you go into different people's studios. So I highly recommend doing a quick Google search of open studios and your city or neighborhood, and something usually comes up. There are increasingly more open studios. Perhaps one of the most famous is Bushwick Open Studios in Brooklyn, but I know there's one upstate, there's one in Portland, Oregon. I'm sure there's one in LA and San Francisco, but I highly recommend those. Another way to support artists and buy directly from them is to go to MFA exhibitions, which will showcase graduating artists' work, usually in May, right around graduation time. I encourage you to look at MFA shows at your local university art school, because they will have great artists that are really excited and eager to start their careers, and often at a lower price point than you would find with an artist who has had a seasoned career. But really, you're supporting the work of a young artist, you're giving them a vote of confidence, and you're letting them know that you value their work, and what's better for a young career than something like that. So another thing that I recommend. So that answers all my central foundational questions about buying art. But if you're interested in this topic and you are hopeful going forward, I would recommend a couple other resources that I think are very practical and good and at the right level for you if you're interested in starting to buy art. So the first is this one, The Art of Buying Art by Alan Bamberger. It's a very straightforward and practical book that will walk you through how to determine if a print is worth anything, all the way through what types of paperwork you need if you're going to be buying art, and the types of documents you need to make sure that your collection is well organized. Seesaw is a fantastic app that lists all current exhibitions in New York, London, Berlin, and LA. So you can do a walking tour of one of those neighborhoods and even add exhibitions that you're interested in to your own personal map. A couple of podcasts that I think are excellent for keeping up to date with the news in the art world are The Week in Art from the Art Newspaper, which is a British publication, as well as The Art Angle from ArtNet News, which usually has some pretty fun stories. If you're interested in receiving information every morning, Breakfast with Art News is a great weekday newsletter that rounds up all the big headlines about the art world, from happenings in museums to headlining lots at auction. And then finally, I would love to invite you to become part of the Less Than Half Circle. If you're interested in focusing your collection on collecting women artists, Less Than Half has an offering for new collectors to come in, join our virtual community in which you can learn about art collecting from the bottom up, and also collect in the company of other people who are also at the same point in their collecting journeys, that is at the very beginning. So please reach out to me, hall@lessthanhalf.org, if you're interested in joining that. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned something. Of course, Art Fair is a fantastic resource for you to start your art collecting, and I hope that these sorts of things will help you on your first step in what is sure to be a wonderful life of supporting artists and living with art that you love. Thank you.